Hello there, and tonight you're going to be watching the Proving Angles Are Congruent. There's going to be a few examples and then a lot of writing, so make sure you have your pencil and your notebook so that you can take notes. First, what is a theorem? A theorem is a conjecture or statement that you prove true. So you are proving the theorem true and you know that it is a true statement. We have the vertical angles theorem. We know if two angles are vertical angles, such as in this case angles 2 or 4, or angles 1 and 3, those are congruent. So I could say angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. And I could also say that angle 2, angle 2 is congruent, which means equal to angle 4. So that's my vertical angles theorem. So it's asking what is the value of x. I'm not asking for a proof as of yet, but since I know that these two angles are vertical, the two lines that create them form an x, that means they're vertical. So I can put 2x plus 21 is equal to 4x. So if I solve that, I would have 21 is equal to 2x, and I would divide by 2 on both sides, so 10.5 is equal to x. You should pause the video right now and try to do number 2 all by yourself. In the second problem, I would put 3x is equal to 2x plus 40, so x would be equal to 40. So now I actually have a proof, and on the left hand side is where my statements are going to go, and on the right hand side is where my reasons are going to go. And always your first statement should be what's given to you. So I have that angle 1 is congruent to angle 4. And the reason I can say that is because it's given. So I'm going to label that on my picture, angle 1 and angle 4. And I'm trying to get that angle 2 and 3 are congruent. Well, I'm going to use the vertical angle theorem, and I'm going to state that angle 2 is congruent to angle 4, and I'm also going to state that angle 3 is congruent to angle 1. The reason I can state that is because of the vertical angles theorem. So I have angle 2 is congruent to angle 4, and I have angle 3 is congruent to angle 1. So what I'm going to do for my next statement is going to say angle 2 is congruent to angle 3. The reason I can say that is substitution, and I'm going to write step 1. Because I'm using that statement to substitute in. Since I know angle 2 was congruent to angle 4, I substitute 2 in for 4. And since I know angle 3 was congruent to angle 1, I substituted that in for angle 1. So I'm using this first statement that we wrote, the given statement, to substitute for my final statement. And now since my last statement is my proof statement, I have nowhere else to go. And that would be my proof. So now we're just going to get into some more theorems that you can use. This first one, if we know two angles are supplements of the same angle, or of congruent angles, then those two angles are congruent. So it's saying if angle 1 and angle 3, these angles right here, are supplement, and if I know angle 3 and angle 2 are supplement, meaning they're supplementary, which add up to 180, we can conclude that angle 1 would be congruent to angle 2, because they would have to be the same number in order to use angle 3 to add up to 180. So you want to make sure to write all of these theorems down. So the next theorem that I have is kind of like the one I just went over, except we're dealing with complements. So if I know angle 2 and angle 1 are complement, which means those two angles add up to 90 degrees, and I know angle 2 and angle 3 are complements, then I know angles 1 and 3 have to be congruent or equal since they both use the same number to add up to 90. Again, you want to write these down for when we solve for proofs. And we have the right angles theorem, basically saying if we ever know two angles are right angles, then we know those two angles are congruent. So in this case, I know that angle 1 and angle 2 are right, so that means they are congruent or equal to each other. And then we have two angles congruent supplementary. So if we know that two angles are supplementary and congruent, both those angles have to equal 90. Because if we know that angle 1 and angle 2 are congruent to each other, that means they're like the same number. So it'd be like x plus x, and we know that they're supplementary equals 180. So if we solve for that, x would have to equal 90. So that would be our last theorem of the day. And make sure you wrote those down in your nice notebook with your nice writing utensil. And I'll see you later. Have a wonderful evening.